The winner is Julie Andrews. Mary Poppins.
Thank you very much for this lovely honor.
Picture this: London's West End, 1964. The velvet curtains have just closed on another sold-out performance of My Fair Lady, Flowers Fill. Julie Andrews. Dressing room, the air smells of success, then an urgent knock. A studio messenger steps in, head down, clutching. A telegram. Julie reads it once, then again. Her smile vanishes. The message: Warner Brothers had cast Audrey Hepburn as Eliza Doolittle in the film adaptation. The very role Julie had created breathed life into, perfected. No explanation, no warning, just silence. Then betrayal. She didn't scream, she didn't sob. She simply placed the telegram on her vanity and walked out into the night. For decades, Julie Andrews carried herself like royalty, a picture of grace. But beneath the tiara and soprano tones was a woman, quietly harboring 7 betrayals, 7 names, 7 scars she never publicly acknowledged until now. These aren't petty rivalries. They're stories of sabotage, arrogance, and wounds that never healed. The first name, the very woman who unknowingly stole her crown: Audrey Hepburn, the silent thief of Broadway. They never feuded in the tabloids, they never traded barbs, but the tension between Julie Andrews and Audrey Hepburn was thick enough to cut with a silver spoon. It wasn't loud, it wasn't obvious, but it lingered like perfume in a locked dressing room, present, even when unacknowledged. When Warner Brothers bypassed Julie for the role of Eliza Doolittle in My Fair Lady, it wasn't duetto lack of talent, it was pure Hollywood politics. Audrey Hepburn was the bigger name, the bankable face. And so the decision was made quietly, and cruelly. What stung most: Audrey never reached out. Not a letter, not a call, not even a nod backstage at future events. Just a void, neatly sewn into every red carpet they shared afterward. And in that silence, Julie found her answer in private. She confided to close friends she's lovely. But that role was never hers. The final insult: Audrey's vocals were dub. Julie's voice, unmatched in clarity, control, and emotion, was left collecting dust. The voice that carried Eliza on stage night after night was deemed too theatrical for film, while Hepburn lip-synced to a soprano she couldn't match. The Academy tried to correct the injustice, handing Julie Best Actress for Mary Poppins that same year. But to her, it felt hollow, not a triumph, a consolation prize wrapped in politeness. She smiled through it, as she always did. But her silence spoke volumes, and the bitterness didn't stop there, because another man from My Fair Lady would cut even deeper: Rex Harrison. The ego that overshadowed Eliza. He was the toast of the stage, Julie's co-star, a Broadway icon, with a voice that oozed charm and arrogance in equal measure. But when the cameras started rolling for the film version of My Fair Lady, Rex Harrison, allegedly, made it his mission to keep Julie off the screen, too virginal, too stiff. He reportedly told the director lines delivered not in critique but in dismissal, as if her years of defining the role meant nothing at all. Julie stayed silent for years, until one quiet afternoon in the 1990s, during tea with an old friend, she finally admitted what many had long suspected. Rex didn't want me on that set. He made sure I was kept off it. To her, it wasn't just a missed opportunity. It was personal sabotage. She'd carried Eliza through hundreds of performances, shaping her with nuance, wit, and heart. And yet when it was time for the world to see her creation on the silver screen, the door was slammed shut. Without so much as a thank you, Rex walked through it alone. And then came the final insult. He won the Academy Award for the role she had originated, the very role she'd bled her vocal cords, perfecting night after night, as he stood on that Oscar stage, soaking in the applause and giving his acceptance speech. Julie sat at home watching insolence, the recognition she deserved, handed to someone else years later at a theater reunion in 1982. The two crossed paths again. She walked past him, no glance, no nod, no handshake, just a cool, practiced indifference to outsiders. It may have looked like two old colleagues missing each other in a crowd, but to those who knew, it was the sound of a grudge politely maintained. But betrayal doesn't always come from co-stars. Sometimes it comes from the man holding the baton, Henry Mancini. When the maestro cut, the melody Julie Andrews adored, music, it wasn't just a career, it was her identity, her sanctuary. So when she was invited to perform at a televised concert led by the legendary composer Henry Mancini in the early 1970s, she approached it with reverence. Mancini was a titan known for Moon River and the Pink Panther, a dream collaboration wazen. The horizon, at first, everything clicked. The orchestra swelled, Julie's voice soared, but midway through rehearsal that harmony collapsed. Mancini abruptly halted the music. He stood, walked toward her, and said loud enough for every musician to hear, "Let's try that again." With a little less choir girl and a little more woman gasps, a few uncomfortable glances, the room fell into a silence more deafening than applause. To him it was direction, to her it was a slap across the face. Julie didn't react, not. Then she offered. A polite nod, resumed singing, and completed the session with flawless control, but inside, something fractured. That night she left the studio quietly and never returned to collaborate with him again. In the days that followed, she confided in a close friend. He didn't critique the note. He critiqued me, my essence, my voice. She never publicly condemned him, that wasn't their way. But among her circle she referred to him with one chilling phrase. The man who tried to rewrite my soul, she would go on to sing for. Millions more, but the wound Mancini left of being, reduced to a stereotype of being told to be less. Julie never truly healed, and she never forgot how it felt to be musically demeaned by a supposed maestro. But her next heartbreak wasn't professional. It was personal. Emma Thompson, the friend who became the critic. They were supposed to be kindred spirits, both actresses of wit and warmth, British darlings, beloved by audiences across generations. Julie Andrews and Emma Thompson had crossed paths at countless industry events, always exchanging kind words, mutual admiration, and subtle nods of respect. Julie saw in Emma the kind of sharp, intelligent performer who could carry the torch of classic British elegance. So in 2005, when Emma Thompson began writing a remake of Nanny McWhite, Julie quietly reached out through her agent, hoping perhaps for a cameo, a voice-over, a wink to legacy. Something small but meaningful. Instead, what she got back was a closed-door Emma. According to a producer who was in the room, responded, "With a clinical detachment, Julie's era has passed. We want something edgier." The words were delivered like a business decision, but to Julie they cut far deeper. She didn't argue. She didn't complain. She simply withdrew gracefully, as always. But that night, alone in her home, she reportedly told a friend over the phone, "I suppose there's no room for manners in modern magic." She never watched Nanny MCI, not out of spite, but because doing so would have made their ejection feel real permanent to the industry. It was just a casting choice, nothing personal. But to Julie it was something more. It was a message, a quiet dismissal of everything she had stood for. She once whispered to a confidant during a quiet lunch in Belgravia, "It's the ones you admire who hurt you most." And hurt came again, this time from someone who shared her musical soul. Barbra Streisand, a duet that never was. For years fans begged for it, a duet, a collaboration between the two queens of musical cinema, Barbra Streisand and Julie Andrews. Fire and ice, raw power and refined grace. It seemed inevitable. Record labels floated the idea. Variety hinted at it. Even Broadway insiders whispered about it behind velvet curtains. But it never happened. Why, according to insiders, it wasn't scheduling. It wasn't logistics. It was something more cutting. Barbra Streisand, and reportedly once dismissed the idea, privately saying Julie was technically perfect, but emotionally distant. The comment wasn't intended for public ears, but it found its way to Julie through a trusted mutual friend, and it stung. Julie had always spoken highly of Barbra, calling her bold, brilliant, and fearless. She had defended her through the press's harshest criticisms, praised her daring musical choices, even called her a vocal phenomenon. So when that cold judgment reached her, Julie didn't respond with rage. She responded with silence. Not long after, in a rare interview when asked if she would ever consider a duet with Barbra, she gave a quiet, calculated answer. "Some voices don't blend, that was all," but those 5 words hit like a thunderclap in the musical world. It was one of the rare moments Julie ever used. Language like a dagger, measured, precise, and impossible to misinterpret. The fantasy of a Barbra-Julie duet died in that moment, But even that icy note couldn't compare to the co-star who left the voiceless, literally. Blake Edwards, the husband who cut too deep their love story, was legendary. Julie and Blake muse, and director, husband and wife, a Hollywood romance forged in creativity and sustained by mutual admiration. Or so it seemed, but in 1981 that bond wasted. On the set of So, a dark comedy Blake Edwards wrote and directed, it was supposed to be a satirical jab at the industry. Instead, it became a personal minefield. The film required Julie, America's sweetheart, the practically perfect Mary Poppins, to appear topless in a shocking scene. It was her first and only time doing so on screen. Blake insisted it was brilliant satire, a necessary subversion of her image. Julie hesitated, but she agreed, trusting them, and behind the camera who was also theming. She shared her home and life with what followed wasn't liberation. It was quiet devastation. In the months after the film's release, she privately confessed to friends that the experience had fractured her image and her marriage. The media frenzy was brutal. The public confused, her fans split, and Julie left exposed in every sense of the word. Behind closed doors, arguments with Blake simmered. It wasn't the nudity they clashed over. It was what it represented. Control, the risk. The question of who the joke was really on. She gave him her career, a close friend once said. And he gave her a script that mocked it. Julie forgave him. Time softened the edges, but the betrayal lingered, tucked beneath the surface of every interview, every red carpet smile, every public gesture of unity. Because while the world saw a supportive partnership, Julie never forgot what it felt like to be exposed by the one person meant to protect her. And finally, the seventh name, the one she never dared say publicly until now, Walt Disney, the father of a dream. And at disappointment, he gave her Mary Poppins. She gave her a career in Hollywood, but Walt Disney also gave her something else. Rules, restrictions, expectations she could never quite escape. Julie adored Walt. She often spoke of his vision, his brilliance, his uncanny ability to find magic in the mundane. But behind the fairy dust and fanfare was something more complicated. He wanted her to be perfect, not just on screen, but everywhere, always. Smiling, always composed, always the image he had crafted. When Mary Poppins became a phenomenon, Julie hoped it would open new doors, grittier roles, deeper stories, but instead Disney's team cautioned her, don't ruin the image Walt created. Suddenly she wasn't just a performer. She was a brand. She felt trapped. The very character that launched her into stardom now chained her to an identity she couldn't shake. Every studio that called wanted Poppins, not Julie. Every producer expected sweetness, not strength. She to push the boundaries, to evolve. But each attempt was met with resistance, soft rejections, subtle reminders of who she was meant to be in a rare, unguarded moment. She confided to a friend over lunch in the English countryside, Walt gave me wings, but only if I agreed to stay in the cage. It wasn't hatred that she carried toward him. It was something sadder, more enduring. It was heartbreak, and it marked the beginning of her long, quiet rebellion. The sound of truth. Julie Andrews never screamed into a microphone. She never tweeted, leaked, or lashed out. But at 89, she's letting the truth out, not in bitterness, but in peace. She was polite until she was ignored. She was kind until she was dismissed. She was graceful, even as the world tried to diminish. Her 7 names, 7 moments that chipped away at the perfect porcelain image the world demanded from her. But behind that image was something stronger still. Because Julie Andrews didn't just survive these betrayals, she sang through them. And now she's finally being heard.